Hello and welcome to our first part of 2 about human reproduction. Today we're going to talk about the male and female reproductive systems, their anatomy and physiology. So hold on to your hats and get your notes out, label them, title them, and off we go. So, first question for you. Feel free to ask any question you think you or your classmates may have about this topic. I will get to them. If I can send you a personal email, I will. Otherwise, feel free to contact me directly and I will answer any questions that you may have. So, feel free to ask away. So, let's talk about the reproductive system. Now, this is the only system that is not vital for survival. You might be like, I couldn't possibly live without my penis, my breast, da, 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 da. Yes, you can. It is not necessary for your survival, but it is necessary for the survival of future generations and your offspring. So the reproductive system is not essential for you to actually live on a day-to-day basis. You couldn't live without your circulatory system. You couldn't live without your skeletal system. But you can live without having your gonads or any of your other organs within the reproductive cycle. I have a very dear friend of mine, and she no longer has any female reproductive parts. She is all female, but unfortunately, yes, the thumbs came down, but sadly she did have breast cancer, and she had a double mastectomy which removed both her breasts. Then she had an oophorectomy, they removed her ovaries, and then she had a complete hysterectomy which removed all of her uterus and all of the other reproductive parts of the female system. So although she no longer has any female reproductive system and parts, she is still completely 100% all woman and living a good, healthy life. Hooray. So again, not essential but for your own survival, but definitely for the future of offsprings, which is really sad because she can't have any children and she would have been a phenomenal mum. So there we are, but better to have her than not at all. Okay, let's keep going. So our primary sex organs are called gonads, and they produce gametes. Now, obviously, if it's underlined or in a bright red color, it probably means that it's important and should definitely be in your notes and made so that you fully understand it and can reference it. So gametes are our sex cells. These are our ovum and our spermatozoa or sperm cells, and ovum are our egg cells. Eggs, ovum, female, sperm, spermatozoa, male. Now, what's really important to understand is that these sex cells are haploid. They're represented by the letter N. Now, that means that they have half the number of normal chromosomes. They have 23 instead of 46, like our typical somatic, which are our regular body cells, would have. So, the regular body cells are somatic, being diploid, 2N, 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. So why is it so essential to make sure that we have only 23 chromosomes, not 46 in our haploid gametic or gametes, our gametic cells? That is because we get 23 from mum, 23 from dad, and when they come together they make 46. Now if we didn't divide it in half, can you imagine 46 and 46, you get what, 92. 92 and 92, you get 184, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. That nucleus wouldn't be able to hold that many chromosomes. So we have to half them down in order to combine them to allow for this genetic variability and for it to fit inside the nucleus. Okay, coming up is a question. Can you tell me, are sperm cells diploid and have 23 chromosomes? Is the statement true or is it false? I do hope you said that that was false, because they are, although they do have, sex cells have 23 chromosomes, they're haploid, not diploid. Okay. So it's really important that you understand the difference between mitosis and meiosis. And when I was younger, I really struggled with remembering the difference between mitosis and meiosis until I came up with a stupid thing. And I'm going to tell you my stupid memory jogger. So here we go. My toe, as in feet, they're not my feet, but there we are. My toes, they slough off every time I walk. The cells slough off and they go away. Well, I have to replace them. I want to replace them exactly the same. I don't want all of a sudden my toes to have a spleen growing on it or to have 7 other toes growing off one toe. I want one toe to be the same, replicating time and time again as I slough off those skin cells. Well, mitosis is what's going to happen in our somatic cells. So can you hear the t-t sounds? This is for mitosis is going to be exact replication time and time again. There is no genetic variability, okay? But my own sister and I, meiosis, my own sister and I, we are genetically different. So Samantha is my sister. She's 18 months older than I, and she and I are very different people. We come from the same mother and father. Same genetic lineage, absolutely. Although we do have some similarities, we do look quite similar. Samantha is wearing big heels in this picture. I'm actually 4 inches taller than her. She also is very much of a lawyer mentality. She's got no health conditions. I'm very much a science person. Science grosses her out. She faints at just even talking about blood. And I have all of the allergies and all of the medical things. So although we come from the same genetic lineage, we're very different people, both in physicality and in what we like and dislike, all sorts of things. So how is it that my sister and I are so different if we come from the same genetic lineage of both my mum and dad, right? It is because meiosis provides genetic variability. Okay, I'll say that again. Meiosis provides genetic variability in 2 places. We have the random alignment and the crossing over. This allows for genetic variability. And we then separate down into 4 unique individual daughter cells. Unlike in my toe, it has 2 identically the same. So 4 genetically variable, half the number of chromosomes, haploid, rather than diploid, double, double, in mitosis. I'm hoping that this helps my silliness, my sister and I and my toe. Let's fingers crossed. All right, put to use what I was saying. So, is mitosis found in gametic cells? What do we think? No, mitosis happens in somatic cells. Meiosis is in gametic cells. Okay, I know you got that right. Well done. All right. So let's look at this male reproductive system. Now, with the male reproductive system, if anybody has a look at the male reproductive system on like a picture, you might think, oh, it's just a penis and testicles sitting in a scrotum. It's all external, and they would be wrong. Why? Because there are actually a whole lot of tubies that go on inside, up and around that bladder, and 3 accessory organs. Have you noticed we like the 3s? The body likes doing things in 3s. Okay, 3 accessory or auxiliary organs, right? This same thing. Okay, so lots of tubies going on inside. Really important to know this because they're going to be very important for male reproductive health. Okay, so what does the male reproductive system actually do? What is its function? Well, to put it bluntly, sorry gentlemen, but you're a sperm factory. You make, you store, and you deliver sperm. That's it. That's your job. That's all it does. Make, store, deliver sperm. Reproductively, I know you do a whole lot more in life, and in your body, but reproductively speaking, that's all you do is a sperm factory. And this is a little sperm. It's made up of 3 sections. We've got the head, the body, and the tail, and we're going to talk about those individually now. The head of the sperm cell is very important because it contains two things that you need to know about. The first thing is that it contains the genetic information. So it contains only how many chromosomes? Oh yes, just 23. You knew it. Okay, here we go. 23 chromosomes inside the nucleus, inside this head of the sperm. And then wrapped around it is going to be this acrosome. Now this acrosome is super, super, super important. Why? Because it contains enzymes that are going to bury its way into the female's egg cell and into the defenses of it to allow for the two nucleuses of the egg and the sperm to actually fuse and meet. So this acrosome, this is an enzyme, so it's protein based, right? It has to be functioning and fantastic. So when it gets to the egg and it's like, hello, hello, would you let me in? If the acrosome's not there, it's going to try and ring a doorbell when in fact it's a knocking. I don't know. That was my silly analogy. So it's not going to get in because the acrosome's not functioning. So the acrosome has to be really on point. And that's going to be one of the things that we're going to look at in terms of infertility without the ability to get pregnant. Okay, now the mid piece, that middle range, that piece there is really important because it is going to be filled with mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. You knew that. It's going to provide ATP, energy, adenosine triphosphate, that is going to power the third part of the sperm, which is the tail. The tail actually has a whip-like action. Now, remember, go back in your brain. Think on the outside of the cell. There are two different types of external fixtures that can cause locomotion. The first one are the cilia. They waft. Now, this cilia wafting we've seen in the trachea, so on and so forth, right? That wafts out the dirt out of the trachea to prevent the dirt and stuff getting in. And it does a wafting. Waft, waft. But the flagella, this is more of a whip-like action. In fact, the sperm actually does a whip-like corkscrew action, blub, 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 like a little propeller, and it will allow it to swim its long distance. And what's powering the swimming? The ATP made by the mitochondria in the mid-piece, which is then going to deliver the payload of the nucleus of those 23 chromosomes to the egg. Now, this is actually a microscope slide. Wow, I can talk today. Slide of real sperm. If anybody's got a boat, doesn't it look like the fenders or the buoys that you put down the side of your boat to prevent it hitting the dock? Anyway, next time you use one of those, you'll be thinking, oh, Dr. Pearman, you've ruined it for me. It now looks like a sperm. You're welcome. Okay, so let's talk about this graphic image. There are a few things that I want to point out. Yes, okay, you can see there's a penis, but that's not what I'm looking at. I want to look at the side closest to me right over here. Do you see all of these blood vessels? A huge amount of blood vessels that are in this groin, in the inguinal region, going down to the scrotum, down to the testes. Why would we have so much blood? Oh, well, the obvious one is for an erection. You need to have an enormous amount of blood to supply the penis to get erect. But we need an enormous amount of blood as well because what are the testes making? Sperm. You can't make something out of nothing. So it provides the raw ingredients and the nutrients in order to get these to create the sperm within the testes. So lots of stuff going on there. The second thing that we're seeing on the same side is that there is a big nerve supply. Why? Because again, it's going to be there for erections. It's going to be there to help with stimulating the production of semen. It's also going to be there to help with protection. So to make sure that we keep, or gentlemen will keep their scrotum and their testes in the right position and condition and blah, 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 blah. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. All right, I want to point out in the middle of the scrotum, you'll see that there is a scrotal septum. Now, I hope your brain goes ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. because that is your brain going, oh yeah, I've used that word scrotum before. Septum before. I've used the word septum before. That word septum I saw in my nasal septum. I saw it as the cardiac septum because it divides a cavity in half. Well, that makes sense. Now I've wiggled my nose, it itches. Sorry. Now that makes sense, right? That in the scrotum, we now divide it in half to prevent those testes from banging on each other or, at worst, twisting around and connecting. Ow, can that happen? Yes, it's called testicular torsion. And there are cases where that scrotal septum has not been divided properly and those testes can bang, twist and get tied up. Ouch. Yeah, it sounds as painful as it really is. It's actually worse. So what does the doctor have to do? They have to manually untwist your testicles and untie them, because if you don't, you're tying it all up in a knot. You can actually stop the blood supply to your testes, and you can, that can cause gangrene and they could go bad and manky and fall off. Yeah, don't want that. Testicular torsion you don't want. So if they do happen, they're going to untwist it and then they'll sew in a divide to prevent them from banging on each other again. Oh. Okay, let's go to the far side now of this scrotum, and we're going to talk about two sets of muscles that I want to point your attention to. Point your attention that way. To the cremaster muscle. The cremaster muscle goes up and down, up and down. And the dartus muscle goes around the scrotum. Okay, cremaster up and down, dartus around. Okay, that's what I want. Oh, itchy nose now. That's what I want you to know. Okay, why? Because we're going to talk about it next. The scrotum itself is going to be two chambers that are going to be there, made up of muscle and skin and connective tissue. And what's going to happen is that those are going to move with the dartus muscle, wrinkly or smooth, and the cremaster muscle up and down of the testicles inside the scrotum towards or away from the body. Why? Well, it is because your sperm needs to be created at a temperature of 96.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Did anybody else's brain go blue, boo, 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 boo? Well, mine did. Because that says temperature, body temperature, 98.6 plus or minus 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. 96.5 is lower than our body temperature. So maybe that's why they're on the outside, so that they can be a little bit cooler than the rest of the body. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Why? Do you remember that I said that acrosome and most of the sperm itself is made up of protein? Oh yeah, your siren's going off now. We got temperature, we got proteins. If your sperm is not maintained at that temperature, what's going to happen to it? It's going to denature. Oh yeah, it's going to denature, which means that those proteins are going to not fold in the right way and it's not going to work. So your acrosome might be missing, defective, just gets there and it's like, I don't know what to do now. Or it's just not going to swim because it doesn't have the motility, or the proteins are going to be denatured. That's going to be a big problem. It's not going to work. So how does your body regulate this temperature to ensure that it maintains it at 96.5? Well, these testes are in a sac outside the body. When a gentleman gets cold, the cremaster muscles are going to pull the testicles closer to the body to conserve the heat. And the dartus muscles are going to wrinkle up again to conserve heat, to keep those testicles warm and to ensure that the sperm is maintained at the right temperature. But if it's a hot sunny day and this person's exercising, their testicles are going to descend away from the body and the skin is going to smooth out to maximize the amount of temperature that can be taken away from those testicles, and the sperm can be maintained at a lower temperature than body temperature. Hooray! Well, that makes sense, right? So, I'm going to ask you questions about underwear. Mm-hmm. Do you think it could influence your male health? The answer is yes. Okay, so what kind of underwear do you have available? We have boxers, briefs, boxer briefs. You could have the tighty whities. I guess they're one of those. You could go commando with nothing, or you could wear those compression pants for that sports people wear. But some people wear those all day, every day. Is that bad? Which one of those would be the best? Which one would be the worst? What do you think? Well, compression pants, not so good. Why? Because those compression pants are going to hold your testicles close to your body, and it's not going to allow them to move away when they get hot. Now, I don't have testicles, shocking, so I have no idea what it's like to have testicles in a scrotum between my legs as I'm trying to run. That mind-boggling, I don't know, that just seems weird. But I do know what it is like to move without a nice supportive bra on, and it's very uncomfortable. So I can only imagine that that's the same for gentlemen, that they need to have some support whilst they're running around. I'm just guessing. But on a day-to-day basis, you don't need that type of protection and support, because what's going to happen is you're going to keep your testicles too close to your body, and it could denature your proteins by overheating the sperm. No, before you ask, it is not a form of contraception. You cannot prevent pregnancy by wearing these compression pants. I'm asked that a lot. Okay, did you realize that your job could influence your sexual health with terms of your sperm? They found that truck drivers had an increased risk of infertility, that's the inability of getting their wife pregnant, because their sperm was getting denatured from the heat from the cab and from sitting on their testicles for long extended periods of time. So it was advised to truckies to add a fan to blow towards their genitalia, and at regular intervals to get out and walk around and to let them move a little bit more so that it can allow for more temperature regulation within the scrotum. Kind of interesting, don't you think? Well, I do. Another thing that I think is really quite interesting is the fact that the testes, when you were a fetus, gentlemen, your testes were actually in the position of ovaries. And over time, as the gestation, that's the length of time that the mother is pregnant for, as the length of time increased, the testes gradually moved down a canal called an inguinal canal and descended into the scrotum. Well, in some cases, if the baby is premature, like really preemie, that means they are born before they're fully gestated, full term, right? They're gone before 40 weeks. The testicles have not descended fully through the inguinal canal into the scrotum. And this, because it is not descended into the scrotum, this could actually leave those testes being sterile, non-functioning, and they can't produce the sperm. Kind of interesting. Oh, and that's the other reason why gentlemen have a higher increased risk of getting a hernia in their inguinal region because of this inguinal canal that the testes are meant to descend through. So if I was to chop a testicle in half, I know you gentlemen are probably crossing your legs going, oh lady, how do you say that? So if I were to cut a testicle in half and have a look on the inside, I've actually done this with a cat testicle and a bull's testicle, and it's really kind of cool. Inside you can actually see that it is lobed. There's individual little segments that are lobed, like segments of an orange maybe, and inside each of those segments are lots of squiggly wiggly wiggly wigglies, like lots and lots and lots of squiggly wigglies. Those are all of the seminiferous tubules, which are where the sperm is made. Now, there is a lot more to it than this, and I've got it written out, but I just want to give you a lay of the land. Those seminiferous tubules are within the lobes, and then there's a region called the efferent ductalis that says this way, boys, and then it's going to sit in the epididymis, which is like at the top there. The epididymis, which is a storage site before it goes to the vas deferens, which is the connection to the exit. Okay, lay of the land, picture in your head. Okay, let's keep going. Question: how is sperm maintained inside the testes? Go on, you know this. And obviously that was with the dartus and cremaster muscles moving up and down and wrinkly or smooth. Okay, so let's talk about each of the parts that I just mentioned. The seminiferous tubules are where the sperm is made. Now, it can take a wee while for those sperm to be made, 64 to 72 days. And I did say it was incredibly teeny tiny and wiggly. Well, that's because there is an enormous amount of wiggly tubes in there. 400 to 600 meters. Do you remember what the digestive system was? From mouth to anus is only 9 meters. This is up to 600 meters. That is what? Amazing, right? Now, as I said, between the seminiferous tubules, of which there are loads, wiggled in all of those tubes, they merge together and they go into the efferent ductalis. That's kind of like the direction saying, hey, this way, boys, this way. And then it makes them go into the epididymis. And in the epididymis, it is going to be stored there. And it's like really short. But it's 6 meters long. That's the entire length of our small intestine. And think how much of small intestine, 6 meters, about this big. What? That must mean they're teeny tiny and really compacted, which they are. And they're going to stay in this epididymis for about 20 days thereabouts before it moves through the vas deferens up and around the back of the bladder, picking up the accessory fluids the auxiliary organs are producing. And then it's going to take it to the urethra for ejaculation. Ready for this incredible fact? Okay. If you were to take the tubies from a gentleman's testicles and spread them out end to end to end to end to end, the length of all of the tubes would be 1.5 times the height of the Eiffel Tower. 1.5 times the height of the Eiffel Tower. Look at the size of the little people. Me! 1.5 times the Eiffel Tower. That's how crazy small and compacted those tubies are. Wow. All right, here we go. Accessory glands or auxiliary, right? This one and the same. So we are going to talk about the three different accessory glands within the male reproductive system. Going closest to the vas deferens, the ones that are coming from the testicles, going up and around the back of the bladder. Can you see how they kind of hit on the back of the bladder behind the ureters? Okay, so location-wise, we're on the back side, the posterior side of the bladder. And you can see how it goes to the first accessory organ, which are the seminal vesicles. Then we have like the little heart-shaped prostate gland. Oh yeah, there was a nice hearts there. Did you see them? And then you have at the very anterior end, the front end, we'll see these bulbourethral, oh that's really hard to say, isn't it? Bulbourethral glands. They're also known as Cowper's glands, which are easier to say. We're going to go through each of these, but I wanted to get a mental picture, lay of the land. Where are these organs and glands that we're going to be talking about? Question for you. I've said this a few times today, so hopefully you've picked up on it. What's another word for accessory? And name an accessory organ within the digestive system. Hint, there are 3 there too. And I do hope that you said that the accessory organ could also be called an auxiliary organ. Did you realize that we have auxiliary nurses? In college, I was an auxiliary nurse. I was an accessory to the nurses. I helped them. Anyway. The 3 accessory or auxiliary organs of the digestive system were the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. Good job. All right, let's go back to our 3 glands of the male reproductive system. And the first one we're going to talk about are the seminal vesicles. Now, these are on the back side, the posterior side of the bladder. Remember, the bladder is the part that contains the urine and stores it up for the urinary system. Okay, now here's the important thing. The seminal vesicles are going to produce fructose. What is fructose? You know, fructose is another word for sugar, right? So it's going to produce a sugar. This sugar is going to be ejaculated with the sperm to make the sperm basically have some sugar, some energy for their long journey. It makes them hyperactive and swim, right? It's like having a little knapsack of food with them on their long journey. Nom, 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 nom. So they can convert that fructose into adenosine triphosphate through the process of cellular respiration. Oh, yeah, you've got this. I knew you had it going on in your head. You got it. All right, the second gland we're going to talk about is the prostate gland. Now, this prostate, as I told you before, it encircles and goes around the urethra. Remember, the urethra comes off of the bladder to deliver urine through the penis for urinating micturition. Yeah, you knew the word. So this prostate, I want you to remember the location, okay? Because when it goes naughty, when it gets swollen or it grows large, which can happen quite often in older gentlemen, they actually have to go up the urethra and they shave it down on the inside and make it so that the prostate isn't squishing that urethra. Because if it did and it got too large, that prostate is going to prevent the flow of urine coming through, and a gentleman's going to feel like they need to pee, but somebody's standing on their water hose and nothing's coming out the end. Spurt, spart, step, stop. So, they go inside and they shave it. It's kind of a really interesting surgery. I saw one of those. I shadowed my uncle in the UK, and we went into the urology department, and I saw one of these shavings. It was very interesting. Really, really kind of cool. Anyway, that was my aside. There will be many more, I'm sure. So this is really important. So why is the prostate gland really important? In terms of reproduction, it's really important because it produces enzymes that battle the female defenses. Now, the female defense is really pretty stringent. We got lots of defenses, lots of booby traps along the way, and this prostatic fluid, the enzymes within, are going to figure out these traps, neutralize them to allow the sperm to progress. Okay, think Indiana Jones going through and the Temple of Doom, and he's fixing all of the booby traps, and voila, I don't know what to tell you. My brain is on a different track today. Can you tell? All right, so I want to point out one particular cancer here that we women cannot get. We cannot get prostate cancer. Why? Because we don't have a prostate gland. But gentlemen, unfortunately, you do. And unfortunately, it can go a little bit wonky. And this is one of those that you can get cancer in. How do you get it checked? Well, it's going to be a finger up your rectum done by your general physician at every annual visit. Okay, so a finger from the doctor gets inserted into the rectum and feels the size of the prostate. Unfortunately, this is one of the silent killers of men because you don't really get any symptoms of prostate cancer until it is really quite advanced. And so it's very important to get this annual check, especially after the age of 50 because it increases your risk as you get older. Okay? It takes a minute. No, the doctors are not uncomfortable doing it. They do this all day, every day. Just, you get it done. Okay? Okay. The next one and the final of the 3 accessory organs is the bulbourethral glands, also known as the Cowper's glands. Now, this is going to create a pre-ejaculate, a pre-cum. It is going to get pushed through the urethra to clean it out, because what does the urethra do? 2 things. It micturates, or allows for the urine to go through, and it allows for sperm and semen to go through. Well, if the urine is still kind of remnants inside the urethra, it's going to be an inhospitable environment for the poor sperm that's being ejaculated and wanting to leave the body and go impregnate and find an egg. Well, if it's died by your own system, that's not very good, is it? So this pre-ejaculate is going to clean out the urethra to ensure that there is nothing remnants in there. Now, this is very important. I hope you're listening to me. Woo, woo, woo. Big warning here. Yes, it is absolutely 100% possible to get pregnant from pre-ejaculate. It only takes 1 sperm to get pregnant. Think on that. It only takes 1. And it is possible to get pregnant from pre-ejaculate. Semen. No, not the ahoy, matey. Okay. Semen is the collection of sperm cells and gland secretions. So semen is made up of both sperm and gland secretions. So semen is about 2 to 5 milliliters per ejaculation. That's not very much fluid. That's not very much at all. But of that, the majority of that fluid is made up of seminal fluid from those seminal vesicles, right? Remember that? That are producing that fructose. And then a little bit of prostatic fluid, 30%. And that's going to be those enzymes to battle the female defense. And only 10% is going to come from the testicular fluid, including the active spermatozoa, the sperm cells. Whoa, that's not very much, is it? Well, no, and which is an important point to remember, that when a gentleman undergoes a vasectomy and they have their vas afferens cut, and we'll talk about that more, that a gentleman can still ejaculate because the majority of the fluid originates in the prostate gland and the seminal vesicles. Okay, so in an ejaculate, look how many million sperm there are. 50 to 300 million sperm per milliliter, of which you have 2 to 5 milliliters per ejaculate. That's an enormous amount of sperm. Enormous amount of sperm. Why so many? Well, there needs to be that many to be able to battle, in a typical sense, to battle the female defenses. There is only 1 egg that is being ovulated in one side of the fallopian tube. So half go to the wrong place, half go to the place where there is an actual egg. And then they've got to battle their way against so many things. And only the strongest will survive. Whoa! And so you need survival in numbers, right? In order to be able to get the egg, get to the egg and to fuse with it and to become the zygote. They say that if you have less than 60 million sperm in an ejaculate in total, you have less than 60 million, you are sterile. That is that you cannot get your wife pregnant. Well, are there ways to go about it? Yes, and we'll talk about those later. But if you cannot get your wife pregnant, you might have a low sperm count. Okay. Didn't I just say it takes only 1 sperm to get pregnant? Yeah, I did. Well, what about these 60 million? Well, it's usually far more than 1 sperm in a drop of secretions or fluid. Yeah, some of these sperm can be super swimmers and super strong and you never know until you find out. Okay, if you have 40 million sperm in semen per ejaculation, you are deemed normal. What do you think? No, that is an abnormal sperm count. However, you might be normal in other ways. Oh. All right, let's talk about erections. So erections are a normal part of the male reproductive system. And this is where the inside of the penis is going to get engorged with blood, and then the vasculature, the blood vessels that fill and deliver the blood to the penis into this spongy cavity called the corpora cavernosa. Then those blood vessels prevent the blood from going backwards and prevent the blood from leaving, hence you getting your penis filled with this blood and become erect. Well, once it's been used or it hasn't been used and the brain sends a signal to say, hey, we don't need this erection anymore, the blood vessels are going to then vasodilate, open up, and the blood is going to drain out and your penis will become flaccid again. Okay. So what about erection dysfunction drugs like Viagra? What is that? Okay, this Viagra is a medication that is prescribed by a doctor to a specific individual for the purposes of allowing them to get an erection by redirecting blood flow to the penis. Now, there are lots of warnings on the box. One being, do not take if you have a heart condition. Well, that's also because they're redirecting the blood flow, right? And that can be problematic. And the other one that you may have heard of is, do not allow your penis to be erect for more than 4 hours at a time. Why? Well, if your penis has had an erection for more than 4 hours, your blood supply into that penis is very limited now in the amount of oxygen and is high in waste products. It can also damage the nerves and vasculature. So, if you took a Viagra, and there are some silly sausages that decide that they're going to, take a Viagra because that would be fun. It's not. Because what can happen is you can get an erection lasting more than 4 hours and you need to go to the hospital and they need to stop the erection. Do you know how? They're going to drain it with a big needle and drain the blood out of the shaft of the penis. Guess what you still have in your system? The medication. Guess what can happen again? It can get erect again. And so they have to drain it again and again and again until you no longer keep getting these erections. So you might end up with a Swiss cheese penis. Ouch. Not so good. So don't ever take medication that is not prescribed for you, and even Viagra. Yeah, don't do it. To circumcise or to uncircumcise? That is the question, which we will talk about a little bit more in a second, as to why people do it. But this is what a penis looks like with and without the foreskin. So when we talk about circumcision, we're talking about the removal of the foreskin that is done surgically and typically at birth. So when does this happen? Again, typically it's going to happen at birth, but in some cases it's done in religious ceremonies. That is quite common here in the United States. Approximately 80% of men have their foreskin removed and are circumcised. It does vary with religion, with geographic location. It varies with ethnicity, and you can see that it's going to vary based upon personal preference. Whether or not you circumcise or not is more of a personal preference than a medical reason. So why are the foreskins removed? One, it could be aesthetics, and two, it could be because if you don't remove it, then you have to be a little more careful with cleaning underneath the head of the foreskin. So pulling it back and cleaning underneath to ensure that there is no smeg. Yes, there is a word for dirt trapped underneath the head of a penis under the foreskin, smeg. It can be cleaned out and it doesn't get infected and gross. So if you have a son who has a foreskin, make sure you teach them to pull back their foreskin and clean underneath very well. Okay. Male complications. Okay, so we talked about infertility. I kept saying, well, this could cause infertility. That means that you have the inability to get your wife pregnant. So that could be from a low sperm count or mobility, that they swim and they're like, oh, I'm tired now and I don't swim anymore. Or they swim in circles. Or they just don't go anywhere, right? So how could this be fixed? It could be done with IVF, in vitro fertilization. So they take a sample of sperm and they take an egg and they mix the two together in a petri dish. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but they insert a sperm into an egg, fuse it, grow it into a little embryo, and they implant that embryo into the wife, and then she can grow it to term, and now she's got a baby. So that's a way to get rid of or to counteract infertility issues with sperm count and mobility. Impotence. This is another word for erectile dysfunction. So this could be where you can't get an erection. If you can't get an erection, you can't do the ejaculating and get your wife pregnant. So they have the medication, as we discussed, Viagra, so on and so forth. They also have something called a penis pump, which they can insert into the penis, and in the testicles, they add a little pump so that you can pump up a penis, just like pumping up your Air Jordans. Kind of weird. And then once finished, let the air out, and now it goes about its own business of other things. Kind of clever. Who'd have thunk it? But if you do not want to get pregnant, okay, if you do not want to get pregnant, you do not want your wife to get pregnant, and you're absolutely certain of this, you could get a vasectomy. A vasectomy is done in a urologist's office. Remember, the urologist does double duty for both male reproductive health and urinary health, because a penis does two things, which is to ejaculate and to urinate. So they are going to ask and interview you whether or not you are absolutely certain you do not want to have any children anymore, and they interview the wife, and then yep, okay, absolutely don't want to do that. So they then schedule you to go in. They're going to shave the testicles, and they give you a little local injection into the scrotum, and then they make a teeny tiny little incision. It's usually a horizontal incision so they can gain access to the vas deferens. They are going to cut, cauterize, which means they're going to heat seal, and then they are going to clamp with like either sutures or their little staples. They're going to clamp the vas deferens to prevent any of the sperm from releasing. You can still ejaculate, but you cannot take the sperm with you in the ejaculation. However, big warning, you have to make sure that the sperm is completely gone from the rest of the tubies, which can take up to 3 months before you're given the A-OK, you are clear and you're not going to have babies, because there are going to be no more sperm in your ejaculation. You can still ejaculate, because remember, ejaculation is going to be all of the other fluids, not just sperm from the testicles. Okay? Absolutely, you need a stretch break. I need a stretch break. We need a stretch break, and we also need a little snack, a little sunshine, a little exercise, a little water, and then we're going to come back and discuss the female reproductive system. So go have a nice break. Okay, so let's have a look at the lay of the land here for the female reproductive system. So you can see that this is basically a woman whose legs been taken off, and you're looking on the inside of them. You can see, looking from the dorsal side going anteriorly towards the ventral side, you can see it starts with the spinal cord ending with the coccyx. Then we have the rectum. Then we have the uterus, the female reproductive, going anterior to that. You have the bladder, and then the pubis region right here. Okay, so that's the lay of the land. Just an observation. What do you notice as a major difference between the male and female reproductive system? Go ahead, what did you notice? I do hope you noticed that the female reproductive system was mainly all internal, right? Whereas the male reproductive system is quite a lot external. Okay, so here we go. Female reproductive system. Remember what the male was? Sperm factory. It was to make, store, and deliver sperm. Are you ready for the female? The female reproductive system is going to hold and store all of the eggs, release one every month, assist in fertilization, grow and house the original housing, the endometrium, in case there is pregnancy. If there is pregnancy, grow and develop that baby to full term. And then push that baby out. But we're not done. Then we have lactation. A few more steps and a few more functions for the female reproductive system than the male. And again, most of this is all internal for the female reproductive system. Oh yes, and lactation. I hope you remember what that is. I hope you do, because that's your question. Please define lactation. And obviously, lactation was the production of milk from the mammary glands to provide nourishment for the developing offspring. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about ovaries. These are your gonads. These are going to produce, female gonads, right? Males was testicles. So these are going to produce the gametes, which are the ova, right? They also produce a lot of hormones, which are going to be really, really, really important. Lateral, meaning on either side of the uterus, which is in the middle and the medial, okay? I want to point out a few things. So in this area right about here, you can see that there are these primordial follicles, and they are going to then grow and develop, and each month, many grow and develop, but only one is going to grow to fruition. And you can see right here that we've now got the oocyte, which is the egg, that is going to grow and develop inside an outer coating. This outer coating is going to then go to the wall of the ovary, and it is going to rupture out at the time of ovulation to release this egg. But that coating is going to be really important to see that it continues to grow and develop into this corpus luteum. Now, this corpus luteum is the part that is going to release a whole lot of progesterone. This progesterone makes your lining of your uterus get really, really thick to allow for pregnancy to occur. Now, if a baby is made, egg and sperm fuse make baby, the baby is going to send hormones and signals back to the body that says to this corpus luteum, keep pushing out the progesterone. But if there is no baby, there is none of this feedback saying, hey, keep pushing out the corpus luteum. Like, what am I doing? Why am I here? There is no feedback that says this is the place I need to be. So it withers and dies, and as it gets reabsorbed by the body, the progesterone levels drop off, and that's what stimulates the shedding of the endometrium, and you get a period. So it's this corpus luteum here. Pretty cool. So what's amazing is that these ovaries are going to release an egg once a month, one from the left, one from the right, and take it in turns once a month. And that this is the follicle that is going to come out and rupture out an oocyte, an egg that is going to leave the ovary. And these pictures above my head in this direction, they are going that direction. They are going to show you the ovary, which is the pinky structure in the back, then the follicle, which is the redder structure, and then the yellow glob. That is an egg. Well, how do we have pictures of this? Well, remember when we talked about in vitro fertilization? This is where a woman has to release these eggs and they get collected in order to be mixed with sperm and then reimplanted into the woman. So they're harvested, so we can get pictures of seeing how this happens, which is pretty amazing. Now, at birth, you have about 2 million of these primordial, like pre-eggs that are there inside your ovaries. Then at puberty, about 200,000. And by the time that you've finished ovulating, you've done about 500 will ovulate, which is kind of cool. Now, what's another thing that's really cool is when you think about this, that when I was pregnant with my daughter, with Ella, I was also pregnant with my potential grandchildren because she had all of her eggs that she will ever have inside her, even when she was inside me. Whoa, 3 generations in one. Well, the potential thereof. Pretty cool. Now, I often get asked about twins. Did you realize that twins can be a genetic thing? It runs in a family. Why can it be genetic whether or not you get twins? That is because there is a gene that can get switched on that makes you release 2 eggs at once. Now, 2 eggs at once could mean that you are going to have 2 eggs that can be met by 2 different sperm that can get fertilized, and you get 2 babies that are growing and developing at exactly the same age. That is a fraternal twin. That is a dizygotic, meaning you got 2 eggs, 2 sperm. That's the case of the children that are down at the very bottom wearing the red sweaters. This is a case in England, lovely children, where they have a very white with ginger haired mum and a very dark father with dark skin, dark hair because of geographic origins, so on and so forth, right? And they had children. And you can see these are actually twins. They may not look it, but they were born at exactly the same time. And they have different genetic expressions from the parents. Because of, yes, meiosis. You knew it. Okay. But the people that are right here, these in the sharing the anorak, what do you call it over here? A jacket, whatever. They are actually models, and they are identical twins, monozygotic. They share exactly the same DNA. Because 1 egg, 1 sperm met, and as it was growing and developing, so we had 1 egg, 1 sperm meet, form a zygote. That zygote bloops into 2 cells. There's 2 into 4, 4 into 8, 8 into 16. At some place along the line, it went bloop, and now we've got 2 sets of cells that are growing, developing, bloop, 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 and forming 2 different individual people that share exactly the same genes. Why does it happen? We're not sure. So what is the genetic one? The genetic one is where you produce 2 eggs, and so you get fraternal. We don't know why really for the monozygotic, for the identical. Now with the identical, they do share the same DNA, but they can be slightly different. And that is due to exposure, environmental exposure and experiences, which will change the way that their DNA is expressed. The other one, the fraternal twins, the other difference here is that they can be opposite sexes. So you could have a boy and girl being fraternal twins, whereas in identical twins, they have to be the same sex. Question time! Identical twins need 2 eggs and 2 sperms. No, identical twins are one egg, one sperm that grows and divides into two different individuals. Fraternal twins are two eggs, two sperm. All right, so let's talk about this fallopian tube. It's also known as the uterine tube. Now, this is the important part. It is the site of fertilization. So that's the important thing you have to remember. So an egg is released from this ovary and it gets swept up by the fimbriae. These are little wafting hair-like things that come here, my pretty, this way. And the current on the inside goes, and it starts to generate this sucking action that sucks up the egg into the fallopian tube, where it is going to then meet a sperm, fertilize, fuse, and form the zygote, which is then going to continue traveling along the fallopian tubes and drop down into the uterus, where it's going to grow and develop. Cool. Well, what happens when it doesn't quite work that way? You might get an ectopic pregnancy. Now, an ectopic pregnancy is whereby you've got a zygote because the egg and the sperm have fused and met, and now we're growing and developing. But this is growing in the wrong location. The majority of times that ectopic pregnancies happen, it grows in the fallopian tube. Now, this teeny tiny tube isn't going to stretch very much. And so it's going to stretch because this cell mass is growing inside. And where's it going to go? There is no support system for it there. And so it can actually rupture the fallopian tube. So sadly, unfortunately, if there was an ectopic pregnancy, doctors have to go in, scrape out the cells, and basically assist with the removal of it all. No, unfortunately, can't replant it in the right location. And they have to do this so that the fallopian tube isn't damaged and preventing any future possible pregnancies, which would happen if it hadn't been removed. Now, there is a case there whereby, it was a couple of years ago now, it was fascinating, whereby the zygote had formed and fused, but it fell out of the fallopian tube, past the fimbriae, and landed on the intestine. And this baby, remarkably, like medical mystery, wow, it grew to term attached to the intestine. I can only imagine how difficult of a pregnancy that was to carry and to maintain. And obviously the woman couldn't give birth vaginally because it wasn't in the uterus to give birth to. But she had to have abdominal surgery to remove the baby, which she did. And the baby and the mother are perfectly fine. Wow. Medical mystery. Wow. Really cool. So this is the fallopian tubes, which you can see going this way and attaching at those globular bits that look whitish. Those are the ovaries. And that piece in the middle, it is about the width of your hand. That is the uterus. It's not very big, is it? So this is the uterus, and the length of the ovaries, again, about the length of the palm of your hand, this way. Now, I wonder how many gentlemen have looked at their hands and gone, oh, that's not... You don't have a uterus. But for a woman, this is about the size of theirs. Now, mine would be slightly different than, let's say, a teenager, a typical teenager. Why? Because I've had 2 babies, and hopefully the teenagers have not yet. And the reasoning is because mine stretched because I had 2 babies. Now, is it very different than that? No, amazingly, the uterus does go back to almost pre-pregnancy size, only slightly bigger. Amazing. So let's talk about the uterus a little bit more in detail. So we've got 2 main top and bottom parts, and then an inside-outside. Okay. So the inside layer is called the endometrium. The endometrium is going to grow and shed every month based upon getting ready for the potential for pregnancy. So the endometrial lining is going to thicken throughout the month, and then when there is no baby, it's going to be shed so a new one can be created each month. Pretty cool. The outside of the uterus is very muscular, and it needs to be in order to cramp up to release the endometrium at periods, and more importantly, to pull to be able to push out the baby. Yes, I said pull and to push. Weird, right? The top edge of it is called the fundus. Now, we've talked about a fundus before, and hopefully you remember it was at the stomach, the fundus, the top curved edge. Now, this fundus is going to be really important in active labor when you're pushing a baby out, because that fundus is going to get really hard and go into tetanus and to go really super hard in order to have maximum contractions to pop the baby out. And then the bottom of the uterus is called the cervix. Is the cervix. Now, at the bottom of the uterus is a cervix, and this cervix is tightly closed for the majority of the month. But it does open slightly and thin out at the time of ovulation to allow for sperm to get through. So this cervix is closed for the most of the month because we don't want to have this nice house, the endometrial lining of the uterus, nice and thick and ready to go, and then anything else, dirt, debris, pathogens get up in there and ruin our house. How rude. It would be like if you cleaned your house spick and span for guests and visitors coming, and then you opened up all of the windows, all of the doors, and all of this dirt and debris and flies popped in your house. You'd be like, well, that's annoying. I just cleaned it all, right? And you'd have to clean it again. So this cervix helps to prevent any unwanted stuff from getting into this house that you're making each month until the guests or the visitors or the sperm arrive, right? So 2 things that the cervix does. The opening is closed during most of the month, and then it also produces a mucus. This mucus is thick, and it helps to act as a barrier to prevent any dirt, pathogens, anything else from getting up inside your nice clean house. But it thins out at time of ovulation. Now, some women can tell if they're ovulating or not by the vaginal discharge and how it is less thick than usual. It's usual for women to have a slight discharge from the vagina, and if it is colored or if it is odorous, malodorous, it smells bad, that's not normal. That's a problem. But if you just got a little discharge, that's normal, because that's going to be your cervix that is just changing and preventing anything from getting up in there and keeping it all nice and healthy. Okay, one thing that I like to talk about is a prolapsed uterus. Prolapsed means that the uterus, the ligaments that were holding it, have got weakened and the uterus can fall out of the vagina. That would be unpleasant. Now, when I did my internship in high school, I shadowed an OBGYN, and it was fascinating. And one of the cases that I saw was a prolapsed uterus. This was in an elderly grandma who had a number of children, and she was old, number of children, and this combined allowed her uterus to kind of like fall out. And amazingly, all they did was they took it and they pushed it back up and put an O-ring inside to hold the weight of the uterus and to keep it up inside the vagina. It was clever. And we want to make sure it goes inside, because not only could it be uncomfortable, but it could also kink the urethra and have issues with urinating. Let's keep going. So a way to make sure that your cervix is still doing okay is by having your annual pap smear test. This is the Papin-Coulé test made by that gentleman, hard name to say. Anyway, they thankfully shortened it to pap smear test, where you are going to go for your annual visit to the OBGYN. That's the obstetrician gynecologist, but really it's going to be you're going to the gynecologist to have a look at your internal reproductive female parts. The obstetrician is to do with babies, right? Okay, we'll remember that. So when you go to the gynecologist or the OBGYN, they are going to ask you questions, how you're doing, and then they're going to do an internal examination. And for that, they're going to insert a speculum. It looks almost like a duck's beak that goes inside the vagina and opens up so the doctor can look inside to see the cervix. They're then going to take a long-handled Q-tip and they're going to go wibble, on the cervix and collect some of those cells. These are then going to be sent off to the lab to be analysed to ensure that there are no precancerous or cancerous cells there. It's because cervical cancer is the silent killer of women, just like prostate cancer was the silent killer of men. By the time you get symptoms, it's too late and it's really quite far in advanced. So again, early detection is key, which is why you should be getting this annual pap smear done every year to ensure that early detection, right? Now, I asked my OBGYN multiple times to confirm this answer and said, look, when do you want to see my female students? And they told me that if you're having any difficulty with your menstrual cycle, go and see them. If you are sexually active, go and see them. And if you're not sexually active, but between the age of 18 and 21, you should start going to see the OBGYN or the gynecologist just to get a basic health line and then to start getting these routine checks to make sure that everything's A-OK with your reproductive system. What are 2 ways that the cervix can be used to prevent pregnancy? So the ovulation and menstrual cycle, we're going to watch a video about this. And what you're going to notice is that, one, they spell estrogen with an O. It's because it's a British video, and that's how we spell it in the UK. We add extra letters in, or maybe Americans take them away. Anyway, but the thing that I want you to make a note of is look at how many hormones are being used in order to control this cycle, which is kind of crazy. So let's give it a try.
The menstrual cycle is an important biological process that prepares a woman's body for the possibility of pregnancy. The cycle takes place over roughly 28 days and is driven by 4 main hormones: follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. They work in synchronized waves, coordinated by the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the gonads or ovaries, also called the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. The cycle begins with the release of gonadotrophin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus in the brain, which tells the pituitary gland in the head to release follicle-stimulating hormone, which travels in the blood to the ovaries. Follicle-stimulating hormone causes the small sacs in the ovaries, called follicles, to grow. Each follicle contains a single immature egg, and as they grow, they pump out high levels of estrogen, which feeds back through the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis to tell the pituitary gland to produce luteinizing hormone. This stops the growth of smaller follicles and signals the most mature follicle to release its egg, which then travels down the fallopian tube to the uterus, or womb. This is ovulation and occurs around the middle of the menstrual cycle. During this window, the egg can be fertilized by sperm. If this happens, the egg becomes an embryo, and if pregnancy occurs, the menstrual cycle stops. During ovulation, the follicle that released an egg becomes a corpus luteum, a hormone-generating mass of cells that releases progesterone, causing the walls of the womb to thicken with blood and nutrients. This endometrium, or womb lining, is thickened, ready for a potential embryo to attach and grow if pregnancy happens. If no embryos attach, the level of progesterone drops rapidly. The endometrium breaks down and is shed as menstrual bleeding, known as a period. The cycle starts all over again on the first day of menstrual bleeding and continues every month throughout a woman's fertile life. You can learn more about the menstrual cycle and how it is coordinated on the You and Your Hormones website.
So the big thing about that video was that it's the hormones that are controlling the cycle, and that one hormone controls another hormone that controls another hormone, and so on and so forth, and that there's a feedback mechanism between the organs that are producing the hormones and then receiving them, and what do they do, and so on and so forth. And it is very much hormone based. So what do you think is going to happen if one hormone goes out of whack? Well, it can hold a cascade of hormones not happening, which can cause a whole lot of problems within the system. So the female reproductive system and the endocrine system are so tightly interwoven in order to function, right? Big ones that were mentioned were the gonadotrophic releasing hormone, the luteinizing hormone, the follicular stimulating hormone, estrogen, progesterone, inhibin, right? These are all ones that are very important. We already mentioned about the progesterone, that the corpus luteum, that yellow structure that was around the outside of the egg, it is going to produce the progesterone, which is going to thicken that endometrial lining. And if there is no feedback from the baby, then that endometrium is going to shed because there's no baby, because the progesterone has dropped off, because that corpus luteum has stopped being producing, and it just withers and dies away. And that's when you get menses. Now, I want you to take note of that term, menses. Menses is the technical term for having a period, okay? So this is the menstrual cycle. Typically, bleeding is going to occur from day 1 through to about 5 to day 7. Okay, so typically somewhere between 3 and 7 days is typical for bleeding. If you're bleeding longer than 7 days, please speak to a physician. If you only bleed for 1 day, again, please speak to a physician. Typically, the most fertile time is going to be day 11 after you've had your period, after you started your period. And that's the most fertile time. However, you can get pregnant anytime during this, right? It only takes 1 egg, 1 sperm. Can you get pregnant while you're bleeding? Yes. It's unlikely, but it's still possible. Just to be sure you heard me, at what point in the cycle can a woman get pregnant? And hopefully you said any time within the cycle, because it's true. Okay, we're going to talk about some female situations and specific words that you need to know. So endometriosis, this is a condition, a medical condition, whereby the endometrial tissue, the lining of the uterus, some of those cells go walkabout. Why? We don't know, but they do, and they end up on the organs they shouldn't be on. But because of all of those hormones in the body and in the blood, they can still continue to grow and develop those walkabout cells. And so let's say some are on your liver. As the hormones say, hey, grow and get thicker, they're going to grow and get thicker on your liver, which is going to push on your liver, and your liver's going to be like, hey, get off, and it's going to hurt. And then when it comes time to having a period, your menses, those cells are going to slough off and bleed internally, and your body's going to have to reabsorb all of that blood. Well, that doesn't sound good, does it? The most common thing is that this is going to cause pain and discomfort throughout your cycle, and in pain in different places, not always in your uterus. So how do they fix it? How do they diagnose it? The same way. They're going to put you on the pill, as in a hormone pill that controls your cycle, or switch your cycle off. And if it stops the pain and stops your symptoms, then hey, we were right, it was endometriosis. They can do surgery, and if they do surgery, they have to remove all of the cells from the endometrial cells that have gone walkabout. If they leave just 1 or 2, it's going to regrow and reoccur, which is not going to be a good thing. The next one that we're going to talk about is menarche. Menarche is your first menstrual cycle. And when I was growing up, and my mum, we were told that it was about 14 to 18. Now, maybe even younger, like 12 to 16. And now 8 to 14, 15 is kind of typical. It's getting younger and younger. Kids in second grade are getting their periods. This is kind of crazy. But menarche can happen earlier and earlier, and part of that is to do with the hormones that we're getting from our food, and in particular our dairy products. So a mummy cow has a baby cow, moo, and the baby cow suckles on the udders in order to get food because they're a mammal, and that's how it happens because of lactation. Well, come along Farmer Johnson, and he's going to stick poor Bessie the cow onto a milking machine and take some of the milk that was meant for baby and put it into a container and sent off to the stores. Well, he doesn't want to compete with the baby calf, so he sends the baby calf away to be either made into veal or to grow up on a different farm and turn into a Bessie or a bull, by themselves, right? But the problem is that the mummy cow is still producing some milk. And so the farmer's like, well, hey, I get to take all the milk. But because the baby's gone away, the hormones that are generated because of seeing the baby, they reduce down. And then the milk supply goes down. Which means that Farmer Johnson's going to keep feeding Bessie the cow hormones to keep making her produce milk and keep milking, which can increase the risk of mastitis. Mastitis is inflammation, usually due to infection of the breast or the udders. And so how do they counteract that? By giving antibiotics. So these poor cows are getting antibiotics for their infections from over milking and hormones to keep them milking and producing milk so that Farmer Johnson can make a profit. Nothing wrong with Farmer Johnson making a profit, but the big problem is that now those hormones and antibiotics are getting into the milk, which then gets into the children that are drinking the milk. And our body now absorbs those hormones and it says, oh, we must be sexually mature. So it brings on our sexual maturation earlier and earlier and earlier, which is why kids are getting their periods as early as second grade. Question, can you get pregnant before you have your first menstrual cycle? Yes, you can. There was a case, one case where there was a child that had a baby at 4 years old before she had ever had a period. And really sad. Never did she say who the father was. The child was raised as a sibling, and she didn't really know what she was doing. And she later in life had another child, and she was okay. But kind of amazing that the body able to do that. There was another cases relatively not long ago where they were 8 years old and having a baby, and she never had a period, and unfortunately it was incest, it was rape, and she had the baby. She didn't know what was going on because she was 8, and she didn't know what a period was. Kind of crazy, right? So yes, you can get pregnant before you have your first menstrual cycle. Can you get pregnant after menopause? No, it's because that's when it stops. Now, we have menopause typically around about 50, 55, and menopause is defined as the stopping of having a period for at least 1 whole year. So women can go through menopause and start going through menopause for years. It can take years and years and years where you don't have a period for, let's say, 6 months, and then ultimately have a period. So it restarts the clock of menopause. As you're going through menopause, you can have this huge change of emotion and a roller coaster, hot flashes. You get all these symptoms, and that's because your body is adapting to a change in the hormone level. Just the same way that you adapted to a change in the hormone level when you were going through puberty and you were an emotional roller coaster. 1 minute you were laughing and the next minute you were a grumpy grogs and irrational and angry and you didn't know why. Well, unfortunately, this is what's going to happen to your mum, your grandmum, and you ladies eventually, is that you're going to go through menopause where your body is going to change again and stop having a period. Some women can also get a little bit depressed at this time because, again, not only are the hormones fluctuating, but also they realize that they can no longer have a baby, and for them that might be a bit sad. Okay, so if you've got a parent or a grandma that is going through menopause, please be kind to them. They don't mean anything by it for them being wonderful the next moment and then the next minute they're an angry troll. They can't help it. It's menopause, and so be nice. Okay, let's talk about amenorrhea. Amenorrhea is the failure to initiate a period, or that you lose having a period because of very low fat on your body, low body mass, low body fat, and this could be due to extreme physical exertion or exercise. Like I think of Gabby Douglas or some of the incredible Olympic gymnasts. I highly doubt they get a period because their body fat is so low, and they're so athletic and they're constantly training that their body doesn't allow them to have a baby at that time, so they stop having a cycle because, again, your hormones are going to be regulated by fat. Well, if you don't have enough fat on your body, you're not going to have the hormones going through. This also is the case for people that have anorexia nervosa. They typically will lose their period. It used to be one of the defining characteristics for disease diagnoses, but then that stopped gentlemen from being diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. So it's one for females that it is likely that you will lose your period and get amenorrhea, failure to have a period. Now, dysmenorrhea, this is the last one. This is about a period menstruation. Now, unfortunately, yes, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. You can get cramping because that's what your body's doing to expel out the uterine lining. But it shouldn't be on the floor in the fetal position, crying and rocking back and forth in agony. Unfortunately, some women do have this where it is extremely painful, and this is where they would end up in the hospital or with a morphine drip and on painkillers. And so if you have a period that is painful, where a little bit of a heating pad, some analgesics like Tylenol, Midol, Advil, or any other analgesic pain medication, pain removing medication, doesn't help, please don't sit there and suffer in silence. Go and seek out some medical treatment. You're not meant to have that much pain. So let's talk about the vagina. The vagina itself has got actually a couple of different functions. Number one is to receive a penis. Number two is to expand to deliver a baby at time of labor and delivery. And then three is to allow for the menstrual menses to flow out of the vagina, to clear out the uterus, to allow for a new lining to be made each month. And this is an elastic muscular tube. It has to be elastic because it's got to stretch, and it's got to be muscular in order to be able to push out what needs to be pushed out, which is kind of clever. And what makes it even more clever is inside the vagina, there is a symbiotic relationship. Ooh, good word. A relationship whereby bacteria are living inside the vagina in order to prevent bad bacteria and other pathogens from getting up in there and causing infections. So these bacteria actually are our good bacteria. We like these that stay in our vagina, and they produce a lactic acid which lowers the pH, which makes it inhospitable for other pathogens, other bacteria, other bits to get in and colonize. So it helps to be as a barrier and keep the vagina and the female reproductive internal system clean and safe, which is really awesome. But if you take an antibiotic, remember that the antibiotics are not specific for, oh, I'm only going to get rid of your bronchitis, I'm only going to get rid of your sinusitis and get rid of those bacteria. If you take an antibiotic, it gets rid of all of your bacteria, which means that you have a higher chance of getting a secondary infection, such as a yeast infection or another pathogen that's going to grow up inside your vagina. So if you were to be on antibiotics, be aware that you could then get a secondary infection in your vagina. Okay, so here's the next question. Where else do we find healthy bacteria? Other than the vagina, where else do we have them? And I do hope you said in your guts, inside your intestine as gut flora. Good job. Okay, graphic picture, I know, but it's important to get a lay of the land here for the female reproductive system. So, the outside, the collective term is the vulva, and this is containing the external portion of the female genitalia. So that's going to be the labia. There are two lips, labia majora. This is the ones that contain the hair in the pubic region, and the labia minora. These are the inner lips. There are no hair on those, and they're there for protection. The hair is also there to give off pheromones for attraction and for scent, and for sexual maturity, and the pubic hair to signal for that. And they're also there for protection, for filtration, for making sure that none of the bits get up inside the vagina as without it being warranted to be there. The other region that is within the vulva is the clitoris. Now, the clitoris, some people have always thought, oh, I pee out my clitoris. No, you don't, okay? The clitoris is a collection of cells that are there for sensory arousal, which then stimulates the vagina to produce a lubricant secretion to allow for the penis to enter. The clitoris is a collection of cells that are akin to the head of a penis, actually far more concentrated in terms of nerve endings within the clitoris than in the head of a penis, far more sensitive. Kind of interesting. So where do you pee out of? Between the vagina and the clitoris, there is the urethral meatus, and this is the exit of the urethra. So from the bladder down the urethra, and it exits here. This again is the reason why women are more likely to get a urinary tract infection than a male, because the length of the urethra is significantly shorter. And look at the location of it. It is close to the anus and vagina, which is more likely to then get bacteria up inside the urinary system. If you are, let's say, a swimmer, or if you are in the same clothes day in, day out, you are also increasing the likelihood of getting a urinary tract infection and yeast infections within your vagina, because, again, more likely to have these pathogens get up and into your business. Not so good. So with this, you can also see the importance of why wiping front to back is so important, never back to front, because if you're wiping back to front, you can see how you would be dragging fecal matter and bacteria and pathogens and all that nasty stuff into your vagina and into your urethra, which could then cause infection. Always wipe front to back, never back to front. The last thing I want to point out is the region between the vagina and the anus. This is the perineum. This is going to be very important to keep in the back of your mind when we're talking labor and delivery. And episiotomy. Ooh, these are words we're going to talk about more later. So lay of the land, make sure you know what where everything is, so that when we talk about it later, you'll have an understanding. Okay. Let's talk about the mammary glands, because yes, the mammary glands are going to be part of the female reproductive system. These are going to be very important for producing milk, lactation, to nourish the newborn. So interestingly, these are actually modified sweat glands that sit over your pectoral muscles in the chest. We have, as women, have the same breast tissue as gentlemen. It's just that our tissue grew and expanded at puberty into forming breasts rather than staying undeveloped, and it's to do with hormone production. So the more of these hormones you have at puberty, the you'll develop breasts and these secondary characteristics of females rather than the male's secondary sexual characteristics, which are produced by the male hormones. Now, what's really important to understand is that when a baby latches on to the breast in order to suckle and gain nutrients from the lactation for the mother's lactating, it doesn't actually just suckle directly onto the nipple. Like when I was a teenager, before I had kids, I always thought, oh, they just on the nipple. That would be very painful for the mother. The baby would not get all the nutrients it needs. So instead, do you see the colored part that's around the nipple? The nipple is the protrusion. That is the areola. Now, the areola and the nipple all have the ducts from these lactation or lobes of the mammary glands, right? They all come out of the individual little pores. So the majority, yes, is going to come out of the nipple, but you're going to also get some that come out of the areola. So when the baby latches on, it actually puts the nipple in their mouth and latches on to the areola. And as it's pulling, it pulls on the areola, which stimulates the brain to send hormones to your breast tissue in order to start releasing the milk. So the baby's not actually pulling and tugging on that nipple, because if it did, it would get really cracked, really sore, and the baby wouldn't get the nutrients and wouldn't latch on properly. So it's just going to be over the back. Really kind of cool. Okay, so I said that there was a hormone that was involved in this. The hormone is actually from the baby crying. So as the baby cries, your brain hears, oh, the baby's hungry. Yes, babies actually have different cries for different situations. So the baby's hungry cry, the brain recognizes it and sends the hormones down from your brains to your breast tissues to start releasing this milk. And then the baby can latch on and suckle, and we'll talk about the milk. But it's not cry specific to your baby. So you might be in Publix doing your weekly shop. You've left the baby at home with hubby. There's milk at home, so you're all good. You're going out and you're having 5 minutes to yourself, and it's blissful. And then 2 aisles over, you hear a baby cry. Doesn't matter, it's not your baby. You hear a baby cry. And your breasts are like, oh, we must produce milk. And it lets down your milk and you start leaking all through your shirt and bra, which is why they have pads that can go into your bra to absorb any leaking milk until the baby can drink off the milk. So it doesn't really matter. So it's really worthwhile having a extra shirt, extra breast pads, an extra bra in the diaper bag or with you in case you hear somebody else's baby cry and yours is not available to drink this milk that is now free-flowing and running down your shirt. I'm not talking out of experience at all. No. Okay, question for you. When a baby nurses, it only sucks on the nipple. True or false? That was a big fat false. It goes onto the areola and pulls onto the nipple. Now, let's talk some more about this milk. This milk is really important for the baby's growth and development. So it doesn't actually get milk to begin with. It starts with getting colostrum. So after the baby is born, it can immediately go and go straight onto the breast, like immediately after it's born. The ability for it to suckle is innate. It's not a learnt behavior. It's something that they're born with knowing how to do. So they latch onto the breast and they start suckling. And this is soothing. This gives bonding. This is really good for the baby, really good for the mother. We'll talk about the advantages in a minute. But this is, the baby's not actually going to get milk. It's going to get a sticky yellow substance called colostrum. Now, this colostrum is amazing for the baby. Why? Because when the baby is born, it doesn't have a defense system. It doesn't have any immunity. So if the baby is born vaginally, it does pick up some of the vaginal flora and it has some of the good bacteria on it, which is awesome. But if the baby's born C-section, then it's not getting that vaginal flora. They actually now take a sterile towel, wipe the vagina, and then wipe the baby down to transfer the good bacteria to the baby and give it some immunity if you have to have a C-section, which is really pretty cool. Anyways, so this colostrum is going to be the baby's first or second form of immunity, because the mother's immune system and all of the recipes for fighting off infections, so on and so forth, is going to get passed to the baby through this colostrum. So it gives the baby a great immunity boost, right? And protection. The second thing about this colostrum is that it is really high in fat. Now, when the baby is born, the baby has all of its stuff done for it while it's in the uterus. While it's connected to the umbilical cord, the mother does everything: breathing, digestion, taking waste out, da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden, cut! And now the baby's on its own. And the body has to figure out how it does all of these chemical reactions, how to metabolize, how to maintain homeostasis, how. And the body is going into crazy overdrive, and it's having to use up a lot of these fat reserves. So it's quite typical that a baby is going to lose a few ounces of weight as it is a few days old. Well, you don't want it to lose too much weight. So the colostrum is higher in fat, which helps to counteract this losing weight business and to keep the baby healthy and the weight up so it can maintain until its body goes back onto normal and it's like, oh, okay, we can do this. And then after about 5 days or so, the colostrum basically stops and is replaced by milk. This is an action where the milk is let down and your breasts become engorged and they grow. Now, your breasts are going to grow when you're pregnant. They grow about a cup size when you're pregnant, and then they grow again when the milk comes in. And this is going to be, they get engorged and hard and a little bit warm, and then the baby is going to start to get milk. When the baby first cries, it doesn't get it gets really hungry and it's like, feed me now. And so it has really shallow suckles and it attaches to the breast and it gets the first part of the milk, which is called the foremilk. This I like to think of like as semi-skimmed milk, like you would get from the grocery store, cow's milk, right? Very, very thin, runny, almost grayish in color, very thin, and it satiates, it satisfies the baby's thirst and hunger, and it gives them like, oh, good, I'm eating. Okay, good, I'm having now. And then after the foremilk's been drunk, it's going to change the suckling to longer, slower draws as the baby is reaching the hind milk. This I want as an analogy to like full fat, heavy cream, right? This is the good stuff. This is the heavy nutrient and heavy calories. It's going to keep the baby fuller for longer. Okay, so the baby's getting this hind milk, and then it's going to be like, oh, I've had enough now. And so you take the baby off, give it a burp, and switch it to the other breast and top it off with some of that foremilk from the second breast. And the baby's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll have a little bit more. No, I'm done. And then, but that just little bit of extra foremilk taken off helps to top the baby up in case that they were still hungry and that gas bubble was like, no, I'm full. Oh, no, I'm not. I still want to eat some more. It also makes it so that the foremilk is reduced from that one breast that's not being fed on. And it makes it so it's not so disproportionate, like, and it evens you out. But the other really important thing is that it's going to allow the baby, when the baby feeds next, it's going to feed on the breast that it had the top up from, and it's going to get to that hind milk quicker because the foremilk's been reduced down in volume because it's been sucked off by the last feeding. And so it's going to get to that hind milk quicker. So it's going to make the baby fuller longer, and it's going to extend the time between the feedings so you don't feel like a dairy cow constantly being milked by your baby infant, sucking your life forces and milk out of you continuously. So that's a good thing. Now, breastfeeding is amazing. How long should you breastfeed for? Well, again, that is going to be up to you, your availability of breastfeeding, your time culturally. Some women will breastfeed their babies up until 2, 3, 4 years old of age, 5 years old of age. And that's perfectly normal in certain cultures. Here in America, not as often do you see a 5-year-old suckling on a breast. It's just not really typically done. If you can breastfeed your baby for a year, you're doing an amazing job. If you can do it for 10 months, 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, amazing. However long you can feed your baby breast milk, you're doing a phenomenal job for both you and your baby. If you can't, for whatever reason, breastfeed your baby, please try at least to give them the colostrum, because that is so nutritionally important for the child. Anyways, breast milk is so important that they actually have a breast bank donation. Like blood donors, you can do breast milk donation, so that there are women that can't breastfeed for whatever reason, they can still get breast milk to feed their child, because it is that nutritionally more beneficial than formula. So what are the other reasons why it's beneficial? It's easier to digest. It contains the immunity responses. It helps with that. Oh, amazingly, if you can breastfeed your baby and your baby, let's say, gets a cold, he gets a virus, the baby's spit will be absorbed by the breast tissue of the mother with the virus in it. The mother's body then turns around and makes the antibodies to the virus that the baby has, and in the next feeding will provide the baby with an immune response to heal themselves or heal the baby from that infection. Amazing. Wow, the body is incredible. I'm blown away by that. Anyway, so the breastfeeding can help the baby with immunity, can help the baby fight off current infections, can prevent baby getting infections going forward. It's easier for the baby to digest. Breastfeeding will allow there to be more bonding between the baby and the mother. It helps soothe the baby. The baby's been listening to your mother's heartbeat for 9 months, and hearing it again by being close to the chest also helps to give soothing and comfort for the baby. Let's talk about, for the mother, what benefits there are. I could go on, but I'm just going to go on to mothers now. The first thing is, you never forget the feeding. Like, all of a sudden you'll go out of the house and you left the bottles at home. What are you going to do to feed the baby? You can't exactly go to Duffy's or Ale House and feed them a steak, right? You need milk, so you're never forgetting it because it's attached to you. How about how quickly you can get it into the baby? So the baby's going to scream at you, like scream bloody murder, wah, 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 and it is like alarm bells going off, and you are in like craze mode. I've got to feed this baby. Now, if you are able to breastfeed, you are able to just take your breast out, put it in the baby, and they'll start suckling, and it shuts the baby up. It stops the noise. But if you are bottle feeding, okay, the baby's screaming at you, wah, 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 you have to go find a clean bottle. You have to add the formula, add the water. You have to shake it all up. You're going to warm it. There are bottle warmers rather than the microwave to warm up this bottle. Give it a shake. So this can take up to like 5 minutes of the baby just, feed me, and in distress. And you're in distress because this thing is screaming at you. And it's like, feed me now. And so 5 minutes later, you can finally, and the baby is like, oh, that took some time, thanks, but I'm now eating. And then they get over it. So time, stress, money. Do you know how expensive formula is? The answer is very, very expensive. So formula, if you've noticed in Publix or in CVS, or it's behind lock and key, because each can be $20 to $120 for a can of baby formula, which can last maybe 2-3 days. So this baby could cost you an arm and a leg in formula. Whoa. But breastfeeding is, ready, free. Really kind of good on that. It's also beneficial to the mother because it can reduce postpartum depression. Now, postpartum depression, the baby blues, is a real thing. This is whereby the hormones go out of whack and the brain just, and you get depression, and you don't want to be with this baby, and the baby is just too much. Postpartum depression is a real thing. I thankfully never suffered from it, but I do know people that did, and it is horrible, horrendous. It's totally against your maternal instinct that you don't want this baby, you don't want anything to do with it, and yet you want to love it, and it's just this internal turmoil, and it is terrible. If postpartum depression does happen, please seek medical treatment. It is not something to suffer through alone. But breastfeeding can help reduce postpartum depression occurrences. So that's a good thing. And the other good thing is breastfeeding burns off calories, like loads of calories. So it helps you to go back to your pre-pregnancy size quicker. Breastfeeding also stimulates the uterus to contract and to go back to pre-pregnancy size quicker. So again, beneficial to the mother indeed. Okay, lots of benefits. Oh, and the last good benefit about breastfeeding, they're tricky, these babies. Their heads smell so delicious. You ever ask a mother what a baby smells like? They're not talking about their poopy diapers. They know that smell of that baby's head. Oh, gosh, it's amazing to smell a baby's head. Ooh, yum, yum, yum. You know why? Because they trick you with pheromones. Remember those scent hormones? They're like, oh, love me. I am your parasite. I'm sucking your life away. I'm sucking your nutrients. I'm sucking your time, your energy, your sanity. I'm screaming at you. I'm pooping on you. I'm puking on you. I'm peeing on you. And yet you're still going to love me. Because these pheromones are going to trick you into keeping this parasite. Yes, a baby is a parasite. You children are still parasites. You're still living off the host, your parents. Lovingly, of course, but you're a lovely parasite, but you're a parasite. And so these pheromones help to trick the brain into loving this parasite, even though it is draining. Yay. So breastfeeding is awesome. So if you can breastfeed, it is incredibly beneficial to you and to the baby. Okay. Now, breast checks. These are something that you should absolutely be doing. And I'm saying this to you and you and you and you and you and you and you. Like whether you're a boy or a girl or whatever you are, you should be doing a breast check. Okay. Why? Because boys have the same underlying tissue as girls. Okay. So breast tissue just is enlarged in a female due to hormones, but it doesn't mean that you can't get breast cancer as a male. So it's really useful to check your breasts routinely every month, even up under the armpit, as seen in this diagram just above my head here, because that's where the breast tissue goes up through. If you feel a lump and bump, don't panic. See if you feel it on the other side. If you do, that's typically normal. If, however, you've got this little pebble or pea in your breast tissue that is not symmetrical, you don't have one on the other side, when in doubt, get it checked out. Really important. I had a friend of mine who had a mammogram, and she went every year and got her mammogram. You go and start getting your mammograms at about 35, 40, and every year you get your boobs squished, and it's an easy process. Men can get a mammogram too. But when they did her breast check, she was fine, all clear. But then a month later, she felt a lump, and she was like, So she called up the doctor. Oh no, your mammogram was fine. It's probably nothing. Your breasts do change in texture every month. With your cycle, they can become lumpier and less lumpy to do with where you are in your menstrual cycle. Now, she was like, well, all right, fine. Well, she gave it another month or so, and it was still there. She was like, no, I'm not happy with this. So she insisted on getting an ultrasound. And lo and behold, she actually had breast cancer. But because she was diligent in doing a breast check, she was able to find it early, and early detection was literally life-saving because she was able to get a mastectomy. She had it removed. She then had radiation therapy. She had chemotherapy. She was on medication, and she is, knock on wood, cancer-free and amazing individual. Woohoo! She is a warrior that beat cancer, and I'm so proud of her, and amazing. And the reason why I tell you this story is not only because she's brilliant and I like to say how brilliant she is, but because she really advocated for herself. And she didn't just be like, okay, fine, my mammogram was fine, it'll be okay. She advocated for herself, and she did a monthly breast check. So really, really important. Gentlemen, you should also not only do a monthly breast check, but you should also do a testicular check. Don't be like, oh, yep, they're okay, and off you go. It's not a quick hello, how you doing? It is a complete investigation of your testicles. And this should be done every month when you check your breast tissue as well. Can this occur in teenagers? Absolutely. I went to college with a gentleman with one testicle. At 16, he got testicular cancer, and they had to take away one of his testes. Very sad, but he's doing great. He beat cancer, so yay him. But you don't want to be in the situation where you've got testicular cancer and you don't check it and it spreads through your body, because then that's really bad. So early detection is key for both men and women. Okay, question. Should guys check their breasts each month? And the answer is absolutely. Check their breasts and their testicles. Okay. We're on our penultimate slide. I'm very excited. So here we go. We're going to talk about infertility issues just the same way as we talked about infertility issues for a male. There can be infertility issues. That means the inability of getting pregnant. The same thing for women. Yes, there can be structural situations like you've got blockages within your fallopian tubes. You've got non-releasing of eggs. You've got your uterus has got stuff in it that's not working physically. But you can also have it where you have issues with your hormones. So if you have hormone issues, this is going to cause the cascade of issues going along that will then cause more problems with other cycles, other things going down the road, and will prevent the proper cycle from happening. So it could be a problem with your hormones, or it could be a structural situation. Why do we have two ovaries? 1 month one releases, the other month releases. We got a backup in case we have an issue. I've only got one working ovary because mine went walkabout when I was born inside out. Mine actually ended up by my right ovary ended up by my rib cage. That's how crazy my anatomy is. Yeah. Donating my body to medical science just so they can go, oh, where is this? What happened in here? It will be really quite fun. Anyway, so your ovaries, you have a backup because it's really important to have functioning for both hormones and for releasing eggs. And if there is a blockage, sometimes they can be fixed surgically. Sometimes you just have the backup. Now, if a gentleman wanted to have a permanent form of sterilization, they would have a big V, a vasectomy. But if a woman wants to have the permanent form of sterilization, she would get a tubal ligation. Now, this is where I'm going to tell you my personal opinion, and this is just a personal opinion, okay? If it's a married couple, and you both have the opportunity of getting this permanent form of sterilization, gentlemen, step up, because for a man to have a vasectomy, it is a very simple incision. The recovery process is you get sent home with a pack of frozen peas and a pair of tighty whities, and you can go back to work the next day. For a woman, this is a significant invasive surgery where it's either an incision about the bikini line or that they go in with laparoscopic keyhole surgery. They're cutting through abdominal muscle. They're cutting through the peritoneum, through the membrane around the abdominal pelvic cavity. And then they're doing the same sort of thing as they would do with a vasectomy. But instead of cutting the vas deferens as they do in a vasectomy, they cut the fallopian tubes. So they cut, cauterize, and heat seal with cauterize, and then clamp the fallopian tubes so that the sperm can't find an egg and fertilize it. But the recovery process for this is longer. It is much more expensive. It is much more invasive, and it has an increased chance of getting a hernia. Significantly problematic. Okay, so we can see where the swing is. The only time when I think a tubal ligation is suitable for a female to get, personally, this is my opinion, is if they were having a cesarean section and having a baby, and they knew they were going to have a scheduled cesarean section, a C-section, where they were going to do the surgery anyway, and they're already there and they can see them, then that makes sense. But just to elect to have it because your husband won't have a vasectomy, significantly worse for a female than a male, but still a possibility. Okay, do you realize that I said they're going to cut, they're going to cauterize, and they're going to heat seal with cauterize, and then they're going to clamp it, both for vasectomies and for tubal ligations? Whoa, that is because, we were celebrating, that is because they don't want it to reseal. In the past, they just cut them. But in the past, when they just cut them, the ends found a way back together and oops, they then rejoined and there was pregnancy. Is it possible to reverse a tubal ligation or a vasectomy? Yes, particularly with a vasectomy. I'm not sure the rates for a tubal ligation, but a vasectomy can be reversed. Whether or not it should be, that's a different matter. It's because it is microscopic surgery that the fail rate or success rate, I should say, the success rate of it's really slim. Not very many doctors do this reversal of surgery because, again, the success rate of it, trying to connect two microscopic little tubes back together again, is really, really slim, and you've already shortened it, and so it actually is quite a painful surgery to do a reversal of it. So be sure, if you're going to have a vasectomy or a tubal ligation, that this is really a permanent decision and you're not going to have the reversal of it. Okay, and on that note, here endeth my discussion about the male and female anatomy and physiology. Up next is going to be a colouring sheet. So follow the instructions on the colouring sheet, colour in the male and the female reproductive system. You are going to create a sperm and an egg out of clay. They're quite fun, quite an easy build as well. And then one of my favourite assignments is the baby cost assignment. This is where you're going to determine how much does it cost you to have a baby for the first year. You're going to include things like how much does it actually cost to have the baby in the hospital without insurance, whether you have it or not. How much is it going to be in diapers, in clothes, in sleeping, like the furniture for the room, and you're going to do it just for 1 year. Then you're going to think, well, how much is that going to cost for an entire lifetime? How much have you cost your parents? Well, it might be worthwhile giving them a thank you and a hug and saying, oh, really appreciate you. I am expensive and I know that. And then obviously you're going to do a flip reflection. So if you've made it this far, high five to you. You are doing great. I'm proud of you and you can do the rest of the day. I have complete faith in you. You are awesome. And this was part 1. So part 2 tomorrow. So good job for you. Pat yourself on the back. High five again. Yahoo!